This is MJ Munoz bringing you a quick review of Skullman. I've already reviewed Skullman one time. It was actually 4 years ago, according to YouTube. So I don't know if that means I uploaded it for my Celebrate Ishinomori 2021 initiative, or if it was from 2020 and it just doesn't quite have the calendar right. However, that doesn't really matter. What matters is that years later, I've decided to go ahead and reread Shotaro Ishinomori's Skullman, and I definitely saw it through different eyes. I actually went back and listened yesterday to my review of it of my initial review of it, because I just kind of wanted to see where I was at, where I was coming from, what my perspective was. And I still agree with a lot of what I said in that review. However, this review and that review are different because I'm a different person at this time. And while I called the first review Nihilism Incarnate, I'm thinking about calling this something more like The Tragedy of Skullman, because Skullman is a tragedy. Tatsuo is a tragic figure. Skullman is a tragic figure. Tatsuo Kagura is the name of Skullman, or the name that he has. Wow, it's really interesting because he is an orphan, and you can kind of quibble about his name, but whatever. He is Skullman. That's the important part. That becomes who he is over the course of his life, and that defines who he is up until his death in the original manga. Spoilers for Skullman, by the way, which is decades old. So yeah, it's really interesting because it is such a tragic story. Before I get too bogged down in that, I do want to go ahead and say something with the artwork, which is fantastic. Again, I still have some of my quibbles with it, but honestly, listening to myself try to come up with criticisms for Ishinomori's artwork, I thought, yeah, I think this is a less confident person who's afraid of being called a shill, who's afraid of being called somebody who just loves all of somebody else's work and wants to maintain the veneer of neutrality. And the truth is, I'm not neutral when it comes to Shotaro Ishinomori. I am willing to criticize, but I'm not going to do that this time because I don't need to. Especially because the focus of this is to celebrate him and his work, and that's what I intend to do here without any qualifications. So, yeah, the first 22 pages of this book, of this manga, are completely done in sequential art, and there's absolutely no dialogue. There are no thought bubbles, which I don't know that. The manga has thought bubbles sometimes. There's no dialogue and there are no thought bubbles, and yet it tells a compelling story, sets a mood of horror and destruction and mystery that draws the reader in and makes them intrigued as to what is actually going on in this world. What is going on in the world of Skullman, and why are these things happening, and how are they connected with each other? And that's amazing. That's beautiful. That's a mark of artistry and skill, and it's something to be very appreciated, and well, I'm here appreciating it and telling you about that. Okay, so now that I've spoken briefly about the fantastic art in this book, I want to go ahead and talk about the story and the real tragedy that is Skullman, and the thing that's making me actually really appreciate this work now. I thought it was just about destruction and nihilism before, and like being edgy and dark, but I don't see that anymore. This time when I read it, and maybe next time I'll see just the edginess, I see the real tragedy of Tatsuo. It's very vague, it's very unclear exactly what happened, and we don't learn this until the end. So it's kind of like one of those twist endings, where you find out everything at the end and it all comes together, and then instead of there being like a cool resolution or whatever, everybody seems to just die in a fire. But at least they're together, because that's what family's all about, right? You can't spell families without dying in a fire together. So, anyway, and I know I'm kind of making fun of that, and I'm, talking about how this is a tragic thing, and now I'm mocking it, but, it's a coping mechanism. It's a really sad ending, and it's a little bit hard to explain without just saying what happened in the manga and like just doing an exposition dump, which is what I don't want to do. So, so we learn that Tatsuo's grandfather, Chisato something or other, excuse me, is the one who's had this detective agency, the Takichi, I think, or Tachiki? I think it's Takichi. Anyway, detective agency looking for him for the last 15 years because he disappeared as a toddler. We learn that happened when Garo, the bioengineered being, the man, werewolf, alligator, bat guy, took toddler Tatsuo away from the site of his parents' murder, and his parents were murdered by his grandfather because when his sister Maya was born, he realized that she, with her incredible psychic powers or whatever, would be a big bad problem for the world. She and Tatsuo himself, if that was his name at the time, I don't know, because we don't really know if that was his name or not. I would imagine he was given a name at the orphanage or given a name by the Yakuza instead, the couple that took him in. But anyway, he loses his family, but his grandfather's the one who kills his mother and father. But the grandfather can't bear himself to kill him, and he takes Maya. He takes Maya. Chisato feels like a given female name from like a book. Isn't Chisato the girl in Persona 3 that Fuka's friends with? I think so. I can't remember what it's called, but the fashion girl with the dyed hair and the pink lips and whatever. Anyway, tan skin is what I mean, and their lips stand out in contrast. Anyway, I don't know all the fashion trends or whatever from Japan. I don't need to. I don't know them all from my own country, and I don't need to. So anyway, the Maya has these psychic powers, which the grandfather is able to tell about somehow. Apparently, his son, who I don't think we know his name, and his wife are both these beyond genius people with various types of powers that are not defined, which is very clever. Very clever trick of Ishinomori to just say they had ungodly powers. They were neo-human mutants, I would say. That's me doing his grandfather's voice. And the thing is that he wants to prevent his son and grandchildren, the people from, the products of his loins, the people who he's responsible for, from destroying or damaging or doing terrible things to the world. And it's like a great tragedy for him, because in so doing, he has these people murdered, but then Tatsuo goes out and he's a loose cannon, and he and Garo are ripping through people. They're causing so many innocent lives to be destroyed, along with the legitimate targets, if you want to call them that, because Tatsuo somehow, even though he doesn't know who the man is that killed him, he knows he's this very powerful person. Somehow he's been able to divine this stuff. By the way, adivinanzar from Spanish means to guess. That's the verbal form to this, to that, whatever. Caminar is to walk. Adivinanzar is to guess. Adivinans, that part, the divine is in there. So divine to guess. That's what I'm saying. He did somehow he guessed, for plot reasons, he guessed that there was this very powerful figure, singular figure, who was controlling all these different things. And he's able to trace it back to his grandfather finally, when he gets the detective who was hired to track him down to identify him. And it's unclear how he determined that all these people were connected to this mastermind who killed his parents. So it turns out, I don't know, 3/4 in, you think, oh, he's kind of a madman, driven mad by revenge, because he wants to avenge the death of his parents at the hands of some, cold-blooded killer who took his parents away from him and turned him into an orphan who was a child, only to be raised by this strange wolf, bat, alligator man. And then it turns out that that's true, but maybe the guy had a reason, but it's, to quote an old associate, it's cool motive, still murder. And it turns out that's his grandfather, and then he kind of just wants to give up on life at that point. And he's trapped in this house that his grandfather has rigged to burn, with the 3 of them inside of it, or the 4 of them if you count Garo, which you should. Garo's a person too, bioengineered though he is. And as far as we know, Tatsuo just accepts it. As Tatsuo Kagura, he has this brief, emotional for him goodbye to the parents who raised him, because he doesn't think, or he's not sure he's going to come back from trying to avenge the parents whose blood flows in his veins, the parents who brought him into this world. And he has a longing and a love for them, which is good and legitimate and true, but at the same time, he has parents who love him now and who want what's best for him now, who are here, even though they're not his blood relatives. Something feels off, something feels empty, something feels wrong, and he feels compelled to pursue vengeance for people he didn't know, and he knows that that's going to possibly lead to his death and his separation from people he does know and people who will mourn for him. His dead parents can't mourn for him. I guess in the hereafter they could, but would they? Is it just a moment? As Aslan says, all times are soon for me. Is it just going to be soon till he's with his parents again? If that, if that worldview of an afterlife exists in Skullman and Ishinomori's mind for this story, if that's something real, then Tatsuo's wasting his time and energy, and he's putting all this blood on his hands in order to avenge people who he doesn't really need to avenge in some way. And maybe I'm missing something about honor culture. Maybe I'm missing something about being raised by Yakuza. I don't know. But I don't know, it's interesting. He had a whole life ahead of him. He had the ability to inherit this Yakuza family and run it however he wanted to and do good in the world. But instead, he caused the lives of, he ended the lives of so many innocent people. And his grandfather tells him, if you want to kill everybody who's even remotely associated with me, you'll have to kill everybody in Japan. And Tatsuo says that he's fine doing that. And yeah, that's evil, and evil is evil, and I believe evil should be called out. But I'm seeing that he's only 18 years old. There's a lack of maturity here. And there's an obsession, a fixation. There's a tragic flaw that he has, which is, I don't know, that he can't accept the love of those around him, or that he's so wounded by what happened with his parents. I'm not exactly sure. And Skullman's powers are very ill-defined, so it's hard to tell, what does Tatsuo know? How did he find out this information? It seems like he can hypnotize people. It seems like he has amazing physical abilities, and he probably inherited his parents' super intelligence, which could explain how he, at 15, started acting as Skullman, started doing these things and started piecing things together. But I don't know, it's tragic that this man felt like he had to kill his father, or his son and his daughter-in-law, and he had to kill his children, his grandchildren, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. And then he decides that they should all just die together because of the monster that Tatsuo has become in trying to avenge the murder of his parents. He's murdered so many other people, and it's just, I don't know, it's this very interesting cyclical thing. You can see it from his perspective, but he's obviously morally in the wrong. But you can still see his hurt and pain and feel sympathy for him and want better for him. I'm not saying want him to get off scot-free. I'm saying you can want him to have made different choices. And that's where I'm at with Tatsuo right now. I really feel badly that this is where he ended up. And I wonder what his life could have been in different circumstances. And if he had felt the love of his Yakuza parents and took it to heart and let the memory, the pain, the ache, the wound of his birth parents being murdered in front of him, if he could do something else with that, how different would he be, and how much of a better place would the world be, or would his little area in Japan be, if he took that into consideration? Maybe he'd be a Yakuza boss who would make sure they don't hurt kids. I don't know much about Yakuza or their families, when it can be avoided, or avoiding it at all costs or whatever. It just really makes me think about that, and I'm just, coming up with random examples now, but I think you see what I'm saying. Even though he's this, murderous person, the fact that he's doing it for vengeance, the fact that he's so young, he's only 18 years old, and the fact that he's been pursuing this vengeance for a few years in his, unsophisticated, immature, teenage mind, 15, 18-year-old, it's not that he's not culpable. Of course he's culpable, and there's justice in the fact that he dies at the end there. But it's also sad to see the tragedy, or to recognize the tragedy, that it didn't have to be this way. And I think that's part of what makes a tragedy a tragedy. It didn't have to be this way, but it ended up this way because of the choices that people made. And it's bitter, and I'm not going to say it's bittersweet. It's definitely bitter. But sometimes a little measure of bitterness is good every now and then. And I really enjoyed reading this time. I think I wasn't shocked by the violence and shocked by the bloodshed and the bloodlust, you could say. And because of that, I was able to see it again with this different perspective and see the tragedy in it as opposed to just the horror of it. And I thought it was, very useful for me. Very interesting. And I don't know, I made like a 30-minute recording, and I made a shorter 10-minute recording, or 10 or so minute recording, where I was, winding up to this Celebrate Ishinomori Day, which everything I'm doing should be releasing before the actual 25th, and it'll be to encourage you to check out Ishinomori stuff on your own. But I mentioned in one of those recordings, I don't remember which one is the solid one, that I actually am writing I've been working on the idea of a tokusatsu literary universe, where I'm writing book series that are tokusatsu inspired, Henshin Hero inspired specifically, or more specifically. There might be kaiju stuff, or like Godzilla. Well, not really Godzilla. I'm not really interested in Godzilla, but I do like Ultraman, and there are kaiju in that. So anyway, we'll see where that goes. But I'm thinking I want a not Skullman literary universe where this character who's inspired by Skullman, but it's a different take on Skullman, does things, and he has such a massive effect on the world that his world, not just Japan, but his world, is influenced by crazy things that would appear in a tokusatsu show, except they're all linked together. Think kind of like Concrete Revolution, but less, I don't know. It's kind of, yeah, if you like, it's going to be part Skullman, or not Skullman, part Concrete Revolution and part my own thing. There's going to be no confusing jumping between timelines. It'll be as linear of a story as I can get it to be. And I kind of want to explore what happens to somebody with all this power who has all these things taken away from him, and what choices will he make, and how will those affect the world. And I don't know, I'm like very excited for this idea, and it's something I wanted to write a short story for Ishinomori's birthday, but I was out of time, so I decided to work on something in the background instead, and I'm probably going into too much detail. But anyway, regardless, I've kind of been thinking, like, what was Ishinomori thinking when he made Skullman? And it's like such a dark, bleak thing. It's just nihilistic. That's all I was thinking. I was thinking nihilism. That's all I was thinking about it. And when I read it this time, I thought, well, at the end, there's like a concession and like a sadness of like, oh, this is what I want. I wanted to kill these people, but now these people mean something to me. And the people I killed before didn't mean anything to me. They were strangers. And so now it's different. And, oh, also, I love the fact, I think the cover for Skullman, the Comixology / Ishinomori Pro one, no offense, it's less appealing than it should be. I'll say it that way. I'll be charitable. It's less appealing than it should be. However, the fact that it has grandfather and Maya in his eyes, and then we get that shot echoed in one of the last pages where they're reflected in his eyes, but their backs are turned to him as they're walking away into the house, is like such a gut punch, because all he's wanted this time is to avenge his family, and then he finds his family, and then he finds that half of his family murdered his other family, and Maya's an innocent, and he probably loves her in some way already. And his grandfather is the opposite of innocent. He's a blood-soaked monster. But then again, so is Tatsuo. And he's longing for something. And these people represent it. This innocent girl and this blood-soaked man. They represent what he's been seeking this whole time, the thing that'll make him complete. And so he follows them willingly into a death trap that he doesn't know is a death trap. But then it seems like he just decides to stay in the fire and doesn't seem to fight his way out of it, because the manga just ends there. And it's just very meaningful. And I don't know, it feels like there's something there. I don't quite know what it is, but it's something powerful and resonant. I don't know that it's beautiful, but it's definitely like, it's making an impact. And that's really cool. And I want to be able to do that with my own story that's inspired by this, but not quite like this. And where you can have this, jaded anti-hero, and you can have real heroes emerge in the wake of his actions in the world that he creates. And I think it's a really fun idea. And it's something I'm going to be plugging away at in the background as I'm working on my middle grade books that are much more cheery and lighthearted, but do have still, tokusatsu-y stuff in them. But I decided if I do the Skullman universe, or not Skullman universe, I'll be able to put all the tokusatsu stuff I want into that, and then I can leave all my other books alone and not try to cram in Kamen Rider references, which is something I have been doing, and I might alleviate or remove some of those in the revision that I do to my book. Anyway. That's it for now. Check out mjwinners.com for the show notes for this, and check out growbugs.com to learn about my middle grade book series, to find out sneak peeks and release dates and things like that. Until next time, folks, take care. Be well.